and welcome. I'm Mark Winkworth. You're listening to Tales of the Sea. Today we're going to be talking about an important Portland, Maine-based organization that concentrates on the preservation and protection of the seas around us. It's called the Friends of Casco Bay. As I look out from my studio in the beautiful waters of Casco Bay, I find myself thinking, well, this place is gorgeous. This bay is a playground for sailors, kayakers, fishermen, boaters. The islands are well taken care of. There's no floating debris to be seen. The waters look healthy enough. And I know that doesn't come without a lot of hard work. In the 1980s, in a report called Troubled Waters, staff scientist Paul Haig of the Conservation Law Foundation in Boston identified serious signs of environmental degradation in Casco Bay, including bacterial pollution, heavy metals, hydrocarbons, PCBs, and high concentrations of pesticides. The problems of a rapidly developing New England coastline had made their way all the way up to Portland, with potentially deadly consequences. Casco Bay had been identified in that report as one of the most polluted regions in the nation. Mainers, I know, don't sit back. They do something. In 1989, a group of concerned Mainers in the greater Portland community formed the Friends of Casco Bay. The organization has been at the forefront of monitoring and advancing protective measures as legislative initiatives in the state since that time, now over 35 years, in fact. I'm fortunate to have two guests with me today, Executive Director Will Everett and Sarah Freshley, who is the community organizer and volunteer coordinator for the Friends of Casco Bay here in Portland. I was interested to hear from Will just what the town of Portland was like back in the early 1980s.
Portland in the 80s was definitely a grittier city than we know now. There's a lot more working waterfront downtown. Commercial Street wasn't as full as tourists as it is today. There was definitely some restaurants, but it was an industrial street as well. Trains still ran down Commercial Street, pulling boxcars off the wharves. Casco Bay made Portland what it is, and it's defined our region for generations and generations.
Yeah, and it was. Portland was the biggest port on the coast at one point, going way back, right?
But it was also, until very recently, one of the largest oil ports on the eastern seaboard, right up through, the early 2000s.
Was the health of the bay, do you think, on folks' minds? Was there talk about it? Was there an environmental awareness?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely was. Well, before that 1970 Earth Day, there was a lot of awareness in the 70s and 80s. In 1988, Conservation Law Foundation, a regional environmental group, put out a report called Troubled Waters. And it described Casco Bay as one of the most polluted bodies of water in the nation. And that report, I think, really helped galvanize a set of people to say, oh, hey, yeah, Casco Bay is facing a lot of trouble. So we should do something about it.
So, in effect, that was the impetus. That's what it took.
Right. And, and initially it was just a small group of friends. One of our founders was Don Perkins, he was our founding president. He also founded Gulf of Maine Research Institute.
So Don Perkins and the other friends at that time had a vision of the community working together and addressing these issues.
And having a professional staff. They envisioned someone to be a spokesperson for the bay. At the same time, there started to be more waterkeeper type organizations, San Francisco Bay Keeper, Hudson River Keeper. There were these organizations that acted as the eyes, ears, and voice of their waters, help be the voice of the bay because the bay can't speak for itself.
And the name was very intentional, yeah?
Most definitely. From the very beginning, I've always viewed ourselves as a collaborative. Hey, if you live here in the community, we'll work with you. We are friends. We are friends of the bay.
Which is a real tribute to the original founders to focus on community, coming together to address real needs. Sarah, I know you're out of the office today, so thanks for joining us. As community organizer and volunteer coordinator, your role was really created to focus squarely on this community involvement aspect.
It was, yeah. We did have a position prior to me that did focus on community engagement, but that position also did a lot of different things. And so the creation of my position was really to have one full-time position that centered community.
And Will, let me ask you, what were the primary activities that the group decided were necessary to put in place initially?
From a very early on, although the bay was labeled one of the most polluted bodies of water in the nation, the honest truth is nobody really knew the overall health of the bay. So one of the very first things, once we hired Casco Bay keeper Joe Payne, our very first staff person who's still around as a volunteer today, and he really helped set our organizational ethos. I mean, we've always been community oriented, but he came in it with hey, let's approach this scientifically as well. Let's get a handle on the health of the bay, launch a water quality monitoring program. So we've been collecting data on the health of the bay for 32 years.
Oh, that's remarkable.
We've been following the data from there. Some of these issues are issues we're still working on, but very early on, one of the big issues was combined sewer overflows, both Portland and South Portland, where there's millions and millions of gallons of raw sewage into the bay every time it rained. Another big issue was oil spill preparedness. Our Casco Bay keeper Joe Payne saw this and imagine one ship hitting the wrong rock or, say, the $1 million bridge could cause a huge ecological disaster. So worked with oil companies and the Coast Guard and the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and others to be prepared in case the worst happened. And the worst eventually did happen with the Julienne oil spill.
A side note here, on the afternoon of September 27, 1996, the tanker Julie N. entered Portland Harbor carrying a cargo of home heating fuel oil. The pilot prepared for passage through the $1 Million Bridge. It's an extremely narrow drawbridge connecting the city of Portland to South Portland. The bridge opening afforded less than 5 feet of clearance on either side of the vessel's midsection. Accounting for a rising tide and southwesterly winds, the pilot approached the opening from the northern portion of the Fore River and misspoke the helm command, confusing port for starboard. By the time the order could be corrected, less than a minute later, the vessel was committed and a collision was imminent. The Julienne struck the southern side of the bridge. A sharp buttress damaged her just below the waterline, which opened up a 15-foot hole into the number 1 port cargo tank. So the vessel reported the collision immediately to the U.S. Coast Guard and then asked for permission to proceed to one of the offloading terminals. That was about 1,000 yards downriver. Over the course of the next 12 hours, the Julie N. would lose a total of 180,000 gallons of oil. And at times during the night, oil was estimated to be 7 inches deep inside of the recovery boom. The Friends of Casco Bay aided in a coordinated recovery response, which managed to recover a remarkable 78% of the spilled oil.
To put that in perspective, even today, cleaning up 15% of a big oil spill is considered a success. So our work has always been also about reducing pollution from permitted dischargers. Thou shalt not pollute unless you have a license to do it. Those licenses are Clean Water Act licenses.
And those licenses have to be renewed every 5 years, I believe, which gives regulators a chance to reduce pollution even more going into the bay. Well, which company was the biggest offender back then?
The largest polluter back in the day into the bay was the S.T. Warren paper mill, and we worked on getting that Clean Water Act permit tightened up. Really significantly changed the health of the Presumpscot River and changed the health of the bay.
These are issues that every coastal city faced after well over 100 years of industry dumping. And it's amazing that we're in 2025 and cities are still are like, okay, we're finally getting to that issue of, overflow or combined sewage or, and you think it's been a long time.
That's true. But, Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes a lot of infrastructure to make up for our past sins, right?
Okay, I'm going to jump back because I'd love to hear about both backgrounds, where you grew up, and a little bit about your education, and then how Friends of Casco Bay landed on the radar and how you first got involved. Sarah, do you want to jump in?
So I grew up in Brunswick, Maine, which is one of the towns that meets Casco Bay. I do remember my family was a camping family, and I remember spending what seemed like hours looking at tide pools and just exploring the coast. When you're a kid, you're just kind of lost in the moment. It could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 6 hours, who knows? My love of the ocean led me to study marine science at the University of Maine in Orono. They have an amazing marine science program where I even got to spend a semester on the sea at the Darling Marine Center, where we went out in the research vessel quite often. I got certified in scientific diving there. We spent a lot of time in the lab and out in the field. So it was a very hands-on experience.
Well, it sounds like you were hooked. What came next?
A few years later, I decided to study law. I decided that I didn't want to be a scientist, but I wanted to be science adjacent because I love science so much. And so I went to Maine Law to study environmental law, and I got a certificate in environmental and oceans law. And during that time in law school, I interned with Friends of Casco Bay. Friends of Casco Bay has a really great relationship with the law school. Almost every semester, and sometimes even in the summer, we have an intern from Maine Law, which is really cool. And I fell in love with Friends of Casco Bay, and I was pretty lucky that a job opening came up when I was looking for a job because it's such a small organization.
Well, a little serendipity there. Will, can you give us a little background?
Sure. Yeah, I always wanted to be a history teacher. Here I am.
Well, that worked out well. And you grew up where?
Grew up in New Jersey and grew up on an apple farm. My dad still runs the apple farm, Exciter. Went to college, Rutgers University, to be a social studies teacher. And I was about to graduate. I heard Noam Chomsky speak.
Noam Chomsky. Wow, that's very cool. What was the subject of his address?
The intersection of the environment and politics.
Okay.
I remember I was one of the first people up afterwards to ask a question. I said, Professor Chomsky, you just spoke about a lot of problems. What are we supposed to do about it? He said, well, go work for an organization working on this stuff.
And did you?
And I had a job lined up to teach social studies in the fall, but I had the summer free. And so I worked for a summer on an environmental campaign to stop New Jersey's Clean Water Act from being rolled back. It was an incredible summer of activism and working with a team of folks and, working to convince then Governor Christine Todd Whitman to ditch her plans to get rid of our Clean Water Act. We were successful. By August, decided, well, maybe my summer for the environment, I'll do this for a year, so I can ask for a deferment.
Pretty much a permanent deferral from the history teacher path. And I recall that we talked a bit about your work in community organizing, ending up in Portland, I think.
An organization called Toxics Action Center that worked across New England to help communities clean up hazardous waste in their neighborhoods or to stop polluters from moving in. And I was working here in Portland, and I was starting to put down roots after working all over the place, and really fell in love with this community. Got to know Friends of Casco Bay, really looked up a lot to icon in the environmental movement at the time, Joe Payne. And so when a chance to work for Friends of Casco Bay came up in 2006, sort of like Sarah did, I jumped at it.
Sarah, was there anyone, before we jump on it, was there anyone in particular that was a big influence on you in terms of, your direction, education-wise or career-wise?
Yeah, I had a couple of professors at the University of Maine that really inspired me in what I could do with my degree in marine science. And one of them was the legendary Dr. Dave Townsend and Dr. Larry Myers were two of the people that really inspired me and talked to me a lot, not just about marine science, but about policy as well.
Jumping back to early programs, and I just want to kind of check off a few. And in terms of water quality monitoring program, was that one of the earliest programs put into place? And if so, what was the goal initially?
Yeah, so that definitely was one of our very earliest programs. The initial goal was to answer the question, how healthy is Casco Bay? And to do that, professional staff, and eventually we trained a bunch of community scientists, citizen scientists, volunteers to do this too. We monitored initially hundreds of spots around Casco Bay that we pared down to 40 or 50 sites to really say, okay, how healthy is the bay? What can we tell about its water quality? And water quality, it's like going to the doctors. When you get your blood drawn or you have your blood pressure taken, that's essentially what our water quality program was set up to do.
Have the program goals been updated since then?
It's changed since then because we have a really good sense of how healthy the bay is and where some problem sites are. We began asking different questions. We started asking, so how's the bay changing? Which requires a little different approach, still science-based, still water quality monitoring, needed us to take samples more frequently. So once we started asking how the bay is changing, our water quality monitoring changed a little, and we put in 3 continuous monitoring stations the first one starting in 2016 to collect data every 15 minutes on how the bay, on the health of the bay. And that gives us kind of enough data to see through daily and monthly changes to look at how it's changing overall.
Sarah, let me ask you. It's pretty clear that volunteers were really essential to the organization from the earliest days.
Yeah, definitely. So, as Will explained, we did transfer away from our water quality monitoring program where we had volunteers take samples of the bay, but that transitioned into our water reporter program where now we have folks all around Casco Bay and the watershed who use an app on their phone to take photos of the bay and take observations. And we collect all of that data and we educate folks on what's going on in the bay and how their photos are helping.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about was the Waterkeepers Alliance. Friends of Casco Bay was an early member of the alliance, correct?
We were a founding member, actually. Yeah, so there were 7 waterkeepers in the nation back when Joe Payne started as our Casco Bay keeper. He was the 7th, but there's the San Francisco waterkeeper, and the Hudson River keeper was the first waterkeeper, started back in the 50s or 60s, actually, a long time ago. Joe invited them all to Portland, Maine, said, hey, we're all advocates for our own bodies of water. Let's get together and learn from each other.
Yeah, and that initial group of 7 really grew.
They founded the what became the International Waterkeeper Alliance, and those 7 grew to more than 300 keepers on 6 continents.
Wow. I want to ask both of you specifically, what it is you think sets Friends of Casco Bay apart, and what is it that you share in common with other groups, and what is it that you think particularly distinguishes this organization from the others?
Well, we share a lot in common with a lot of groups, and that many people might not know how closely environmental groups in Maine work together. There's more than 40 environmental groups that are part of Environmental Priorities Coalition, a coalition run by Maine Conservation Alliance, that we work together on a shared legislative agenda up in Augusta and work together on some of the biggest issues. I think what Friends of Casco Bay, what sets us apart is, first of all, we're place-based. We are about this place. Whether you're looking out on Casco Bay from Portland or from Freeport or from Phippsburg, Harpswell, Brunswick, or in a watershed, which goes as far west as Bethel, we're about this place. We're about reducing pollution in these waters and making our quality of lives all a little better in the process.
Sarah, do you have just a thought on that?
Yeah, I'll also say there are, of course, other organizations that do this, but something that we do, especially as such a small team, is we do scientific monitoring. We also do advocacy and we do community engagement. Those are really the 3 pillars of our work. And so all of those overlap all of the time. And we're also up in the legislature helping to get a stormwater resolve passed in the legislature. And both of those things heavily involve the community. We ask our community to testify on bills that we have in the legislature. Our community is involved in our science work through Water Reporter. And so we do all 3 of those things really well. And we accomplish a lot for the size of our team.
Folks may not know you're a small, relatively small, but mighty team. Can you give us a picture of it?
Yeah, sure. We have 11 staff. Our Casco Bay keeper, Ivy Finuka, is our lead advocate. On the science side, Mike Doan, our staff scientist. Kind of bridging those two positions, we have a science and advocacy associate, helping both in the science and the advocacy realm. We have 2 development staff, admin staff. On the community engagement side, you're talking with Sarah, especially here. We also have a pump out captain. One of our bigger victories was making Casco Bay a no discharge area, making sure that boaters aren't allowed to dump their sewage waste into the bay.
Yeah, I've seen the pump out boat out in the bay, aptly named Headmaster, helping boaters comply with the law in a ecological way. So, in terms of the size of staff, it's small but mighty.
We couldn't do anything for the bay if we weren't working with the city and town staff around the bay. We couldn't do anything if we weren't working closely with the other environmental groups in Maine and in the watershed. It's those partnerships that really make the difference. Doesn't matter how many staff we have. If we weren't working together with the community, we wouldn't be able to make a difference.
Oh, that's great. Really inspiring. Sarah, from what I've read, 2024 is a very productive year for Friends of Casco Bay.
Yeah, so this past year has been really exciting because on top of the water quality monitoring that we do, we've been able to explore 2 different scientific projects. One of them has been testing for PFAS.
Sarah, what's the nature of your project in partnership with Bigelow Laboratories here in Maine?
We've been studying PFAS. It's the first study that's been done in Maine for PFAS within marine waters versus tissues of fish or other marine organisms and versus freshwater or drinking water. So we are really with the guidance and help of Bigelow leading the way in marine research in PFAS in Maine, and that study is ongoing at the moment. We also are tracking eelgrass. As many people who are familiar with our work know, eelgrass is a vital marine habitat and it is in decline very rapidly. So we are in partnership with the Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, with Cobalt, and with Manomet, we are researching why is eelgrass declining. So we're part of a pilot project right now to research that. And the next phase of that will be to look at restoration for eelgrass. So those are on the scientific side, some really exciting things we're working on.
There are also some exciting things happening in the green infrastructure space, correct?
That is under the stormwater or the stormwater pollution umbrella. That is an issue that we have worked on for years and will continue to work on for years. It's a really, really big, complex area of both regulation, engineering, and science. But stormwater pollution is the biggest source of pollution into Casco Bay.
It's been quite a year, 2024. And as regards to PFAS, it seems like not only are these chemicals forever, but they seem to be popping up everywhere, popping up in more and more unexpected places.
And they're used in firefighting foam for fires that occur in airplanes or have to do with oil or certain materials that water alone isn't enough. So in some, they're really useful in a lot of ways, which is why they're everywhere. But what's happening is they get into our environment. There was a spill in Brunswick this last year from the old Naval Air Station of firefighting foam into the waterways there. And so there's a lot of legislation currently going through about the storage of firefighting foam and what to do about it to prevent accidental spills from happening.
We've talked about the importance of having a strong voice in the Maine legislature to make sure that these concerns are not only voiced, but have support from the community.
Our voice of the bay is our Casco Bay keeper, Ivy Finuka, is leading the charge there. And we always need the community to chime in. We're lucky the Maine legislature really does listen to Mainers, sending an email or making some time to be in Augusta and testifying, telling your story makes a big difference.
Well, I would think it's particularly important at this time and with the current administration that folks have a voice and folks use their voice to protect what we all know is critically important.
I was just going to say, I think that's more important than ever to think about as Mainers, as the federal government is taking big steps backward on environmental regulation. We have a legislature that cares about clean water and clean air. We have a governor who cares about clean water, clean air. These are Maine values, regardless of what's happening outside of Maine or happening in Washington, D.C., that we could still move forward. And it's because of Mainers making their voices heard and keeping these issues forefront in our decision makers' minds.
Sarah, we've talked about a number of ways that folks can get involved. But I think for folks listening in, is the best thing for them to do to simply go to the website and look at opportunities that are there?
Yeah, so we have a section on our website that says get involved, and we invite you to go to the volunteer link, and there you can sign up to be a volunteer, and you choose which opportunities you're interested in hearing about and signing up for. And Water Reporter is unique in that it's an ongoing volunteer opportunity, but we do have events throughout the year to help educate and foster community amongst water reporters. There's also a lot of information about it on our website, and then other volunteer opportunities such as cleaning up the coast or helping volunteer with some of our events. We also do mailings every single month. Those we will all notify you via email once you're on that volunteer list.
Sarah, we've talked about the importance of community, without which I believe, as Will said, there would be no Friends of Casco Bay. And I can't help but think, as I look at your mission statement, that the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this community is of vital importance. And I know that's more than a bit of a hot button issue these days, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, as we've said many times during this conversation, we are a Friends organization, and community is vital to our work. So we take inclusion very seriously, and Casco Bay is the most diverse watershed in Maine, and clean water is really important to quality of life here for everyone. And so we really try to be representative of the watershed and include and listen to all of the voices here.
Well said. Well said. Okay, so last question. I like to ask everybody if they have a favorite tale of the sea. That could be a story or a song or a book or a poem or anything, something that you enjoy and you come back to. Will, do you have anything?
For me, it's Moby Dick.
Fine choice.
Love the story of the sea and the whale, but there's in the first chapter, Melville has a really great quote about how important water is to all of us. I'm paraphrasing, but it says, if you follow any footpath, it will lead you to water. There's just something about water that makes all of us go straight to it. And it is true. You follow any trail, any path, and you're going to end up at a body of water. And I just always love that.
That's great. Sarah, anything come to mind on favorite tale of the sea?
Yeah, another book. It's called Underwater to Get Out of the Rain, A Love Affair with the Sea. It's by Trevor Norton, and he is a diver that lives in the UK, a very rainy place, and he dives in his free time as a hobby and just finds an entire world underwater there, and just his language and the way he talks about it. It's a very mindful book.
Yeah, it sounds it.
Yeah, I related to him because I learned how to dive in Maine, where people are like, what's there to see in Maine? And yes, there's some very dark, murky days down there, but it is amazing. I mean, what there is in that, what people have no idea is right there.
Just waiting to be explored. Listen, I want to say thank you both for spending time with me today. I've really appreciated it. It's very educational, and I know folks listening in will have a much better knowledge of not only Friends of Casco Bay, but how they can get involved in their community, no matter where you call home. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
That ends this episode of Tales of the Sea. For more information on the Friends of Casco Bay, you can go directly to their website, cascobay.org. Special thanks to my guests today, Sarah Freshley and Will Everett of the Friends of Casco Bay, for giving us an inside look at what I consider to be one of the most significant and vital community-based organizations at work today, looking out for the health and safety of our most precious resource, the sea around us. This episode was produced at Munjoy Studios here in Portland, Maine. As always, special thanks to my producer, Jewel Selbo. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to tell a friend or two. And remember, you can find this podcast, Tales of the Sea, wherever you stream your favorite podcasts. I'm Mark Winkworth. Thanks for listening.